Hello, everybody. It is November 12th, 2020. Still, welcome to the Fifth Avenue Podcast, presented by the Fifth Avenue Cinema, Oregon's only student-run cinema, a podcast about love, family, and prison abolition. We're coming to you somewhat live from the safety of our homes. I have just postmarked some gloves and masks and hand sanitizer to all of my partners here on this podcast, so don't worry about it. And we're here to give you the latest in all things cinema. And my name is Tracy, of course, he, him pronouns. I'm a 35 millimeter projectionist in the cinema, podcast host currently. And my shout out is to this carbonara that me and Ella made yesterday that I ate for lunch at work today. Still slaps a day later. Shout out to noodles, shout out to pasta, shout out to cheese. Unless you're lactose intolerant, except for me. No one's talking to Nayeli. Shout out to pasta.
I am anti-pasta.
Anyway, and the next person that's introducing is
pro pasta. This is not
the vibes.
They, them pronouns, cinema coordinator here at Fifth Ave. And my shout out today goes to Open Mike Eagle's album Anime, Trauma, and Divorce, because I've been listening to it nonstop because it's fucking funny. Ooh. Yeah, it's a good fucking album. Highly recommend it to anyone who is familiar or isn't familiar with Open Mike Eagle. But that's who I am. Who's up next?
Owen is up next. I am the publicity coordinator. I use he, him, his pronouns. And I have two shout-outs. One is going to go to Thrift Books for hooking me up with a good deal on a art book that I've been looking for. And my second is going to Jenny Holzer.
Oh, okay.
And my second shout-out, well, actually, it's an anti-shout-out to whoever at Apple Music keeps putting Dear April on when I'm not expecting it, in like the autoplay feature that they have now.
Okay.
Because it hits me at a time when I don't want to hear it. So stop, please.
Shout out Frank Ocean for
yes,
always.
Shout out. I love the song, but not the timing. And I'm joined with
Nayeli, the podcast editor. I hope I've been doing good recently. I'm not quite sure. And I have an anti-shout out to my ex-coworker who had the audacity
Talk to him.
to tell me, a Mexican, that beans are not necessary in a burrito. Like the audacity.
Get him.
I'm.
What is a burrito without beans? It's sad.
A quesadilla.
Yeah, I'm like,
not if there's not cheese in it. Burritos do not need cheese.
No.
I'm not willing to fight for that. So then you're right. I'm not willing to fight for that.
I am right. Thank you very much.
Pasta, on the other hand.
Pasta, okay, I'm like, yo, we can duke it out.
Here's the thing. I just didn't grow up eating pasta. Pasta is usually really heavy because there's a lot of oil and a lot of cheese. It's too much for me sometimes.
So let me get this straight. Your opinion on pasta is because you didn't grow up on it. You didn't even eat it that much. And you trying to tell me that no shout out to pasta. Man. Listeners at home, did you hear this mess? Hopefully she don't edit this mess out since she's the editor.
No. I will keep this in. Here's what I'll say. I used to be pasta neutral, and then I turned veg, and every single fucking vegetarian recipe is pasta.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's the elite. It's the elite.
What about the lentils? What about the Indian food? There's so many other chickpeas. Come on, there's so much more.
You know how they can be fire if they're put together. That's the crazy thing about pasta. Sponsored by Big Pasta.
I'm done with this. Let's continue.
Many of these people have no respect for other human beings' lives. No matter how sane or how understanding you try to be, it just will make you lose your absolute mind. You know how hard I'm gonna be smiling when you come home? Success is the best revenge. success is the best revenge. You're going to show them that they can't treat human life this way.
On today's podcast, we're going to talk about one of my choices for our fall program, Time, directed by Garrett Bradley. It came out this year in 2020. So Time, obviously, as you heard in the trailer, I believe, it follows the journey of Sibil Fox Richardson, or as she's affectionately called by people around her, Fox Rich. I think it's kind of also like her persona is like she's Fox Rich. As she continues her fight to release her husband, Rob Rich, who is serving a 60-year sentence off of robbery that they both committed. It's a documentary that I think is very timely, and I don't think that was at all a predetermined choice. I think from what I remember, Garrett Bradley came across this subject off of like a previous short film she made, and I think around 2016. I've seen it because it's on YouTube. We'll probably link it when we post about it or whatever. We'll let you guys know. It is a short film called Alone, where it was Garrett Bradley following a friend of hers who had a husband, or boyfriend rather, who was incarcerated off of, I think, of like a very petty charge. And it follows a day in that woman's life as she prepares to get married to him while he's in prison. And as I looked into it, and there was a live Q&A thing with Fox Rich, she explained that Garrett Bradley got connected to her through that woman because they were both part of this coalition. I don't remember the acronym of it, but it was like Louisiana's like prison abolition, something like that, about, you know, partners who have partners themselves in prison, building a community around that, and, you know, looking for a release of their partners. And she found out about Fox Rich through that, and Fox Rich herself was like, could you, like, you know, document our family and our fight to get my husband out? And then in like I think about 2 or 3 years this film is like encompasses, that is what got us here. That's what got us this film. And I think it's a crazy ride, but that goes to my point of saying I don't think this was like, it's timely in a way that isn't didactic. It was part of a larger movement, a part of a larger process. And I chose this film specifically because I saw it this summer. As we may all know from listening to this podcast, I'm a film major, obviously, and filmmaker. So I'm like a nerd about festivals and finding out about shit before it comes out. And because of the Rona, you know, I'm not going to try to give Rona too much credit, but because of the Rona, a lot of prestigious film festivals this year transitioned to doing online virtual showings. And because of that, I was able to see Time via the New York Film Festival, I think back in September, and it's now on Amazon Prime. And I was willing to wait, but I couldn't when I realized I had a chance. And I was blown away by the story, by the imagery, by the use of archival / home videos. And I had heard about Garrett Bradley and her work for a while, but she's one of those artists that you can't always see her stuff because it's either part of a museum or some private situation. And this is one of her films that was able to be seen by the public, and I just had to see it. And it's, as a kid who has many friends who have been incarcerated, have many friends who've had parents that have been incarcerated, had my own father that was incarcerated at one point of my childhood, it really struck a chord, and I needed other people to see it with me. I needed other people, specifically like my squadron here, to watch it and to like experience it with me, or at least experience it in a way where we can talk about it. So with that being said, Nayeli, I would like to ask you, how did you feel about the movie yourself?
I think this one, much like Roma, was both too much and for me, but like in the best way possible. It hit me in a way that I really did not expect. Like once it ended, I just cried for 5 minutes straight. And I haven't cried like that for a movie like ever in my life. It was such a bizarre thing for me. And thankfully I was with my partner who comforted me and he didn't make me explain anything, which would have honestly made things worse for me. But like, he didn't ask anything. He was just there for me as I was kind of going through everything that this film brought up for me. I know I haven't like talked to y'all about it, but like my dad was jailed multiple times and each time he got deported because he was not a citizen here. And the last time he got jailed or whatever, he was when I was like 8, and he, went back to Mexico and never came back. So much like a lot of kids and the kids in this show, like I didn't have my dad because of this system. I mean, it's a little different because for us it was more about immigration, but on a personal note, it really hit me. But also it was just visually and thematically a beautiful documentary.
Yeah, that was very well put, Niley. I understand, because it is worth mentioning that this story, but it follows a African American, a Black family, and it's very specific to them. As I think we all know. If you don't know, you're gonna know that the prison industrial complex, and along with the police that are kind of in tandem, disproportionately jails and imprisons Black and brown people. So like, it is part of the story that this is part of this is a system that is built for the imprisonment of people like Fox Rich and Rob Rich, and like my family or Nayeli's family and everything. This is not this credit, white families and everything like that, but it goes without saying that it's different. And this film kind of puts that, not want to say into perspective, but it becomes part of the story. It doesn't shy away from that. It is like Fox Rich herself talks about it. Even her mother talks about it. There's an opening sequence that, and I just want to say this a little bit before I get to the rest of y'all talking about it, but like there's an opening part in the film where we're getting to the point where Fox Rich is kind of explaining how we got to prison. And then the film cuts to her mom talking about it. And she talks about prison in general. And I don't think she meant for it to be this sweeping thing, but she kind of made a very astute point where she's like, it's like slavery days. They want to keep us locked in. They want to keep us in prison, this cycle of abuse that is very reminiscent of slavery. And I thought that was great that was in there so early on, because it really hammers down the notion that this is an issue that is it's more intense for a specific group of people.
Yeah, and this is kind of a side note from the movie, but for anyone listening who feels like they're not aware enough about the prison industrial complex to really get a gauge of this film, Tracy brought this up, which I thought was great reading. I would highly recommend seeking out Angela Davis's Are Prisons Obsolete, just to read especially from a Black queer woman's perspective on like why the prison industrial complex disproportionately incarcerates Black and brown people. Like, I'm just speaking to anyone listening who feels like they don't know. I feel like you can't have completely ignored it at this point in time with the current like political environment, with general abolitionist movements kind of coming to a forefront, even if it's kind of going away in election season. But this is also to go back to the movie, that the opening sequence of Sibil Fox's like mini DV recordings really got to me, because I can't think about documentation of like everything that you're missing out on. When this all started, I can remember my partner at the time talking about like, just document everything because you're gonna want to remember. And that really stuck with me, because like I compulsorily take videos and watch like just photos of moments because I have such a bad short-term memory. But the fact that her husband was missing out on years and like having children who didn't know him in a physical presence at all. And she documents like kind of not their day-to-day, but just in general, like talking to the camera. And it's very much like, in reading through the Wikipedia, like this was something where it wasn't going to be like this full-blown documentary. And then she was like, oh, I also have these, do with them what you will kind of thing. And I feel like that made it even more kind of heart-wrenching, because it's like, for me personally, like obviously I am a white person saying this, so like it's not the same kind of impact, and I can't say that I understand that experience on a personal level, but I can't imagine being incarcerated and missing out on 20 plus years of like your family growing without you and without your physical presence, and then being able to watch that and like see that growth and like general mundanity of life that you didn't get to partake in, and like actually have physical evidence that it happened, like besides your grown children standing in front of you. So in general, I'm very happy that this is a film that was made, and the power of documentation is really important. So I would say to anyone here, like, if you take anything away from isolation in general, just like document the little things, because you're not gonna remember them, or there'll be days where you're just like, did that happen or not? But also, like, it's mental illness. So that's why my brain is like this. But I'm gonna throw it over to Owen and stop talking so much.
So I watched this movie like 3 hours ago, maybe, which I greatly regret doing because I wish I would have watched it probably at least twice, because this movie has kind of affected me, like stimulated me in a way that I haven't been before, in the sense that I felt like very overwhelmed when it was over. I think the ending, kind of like with the piano and the montage, just like a knife in the heart, like, it just hits you. But what Maddie mentioned before, being white straight male, just the anger that comes from it, and also the unfamiliarity of the subject, because I've never experienced anything like that. I have a very stable family situation. I don't find myself in situations with legality ever because of my privilege. And it's hard to talk about because I just can't like articulate things right now, because I feel like the thing about the film is it's short, like 80 minutes, I want to say, right? And it's not paced incredibly fast, I don't feel like, but I also feel like it's so dense in what it is giving you, that it's like hard to palate this soon after watching it, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, I get it. I mean, it's a film that I think it's pretty, like you were saying, it's dense. Like, it's dense in its quietness. There are many moments where I noticed that the heaviness of a scene, whether it be emotionally or mentally, whatever, usually comes at its quiet moments. Like, I speak to like moments like Fox Rich is on the phone with, like, random, like, I wouldn't say random, but like county people, office attendants or whatever, on the phone trying to see if a judge has moved the papers through to like get her to have her husband released, and she gets a swift no, and
They cut her off too.
they cut her off
Pissed me
sometimes
off.
too. And because I assume that she calls almost all the time, which is fair, obviously. And like, she gets cut off, they say no, and she politely says thank you, thank you for your help or whatever, hangs up the phone. And like, what I love, and I know that there's a lot of hurt behind it, is that like the camera doesn't move, it stays on her for a little bit. She kind of just sits there. And I think those silent moments are the heaviest. And there's moments like that where you see her sit there and like kind of like sit in that dismissal, and then the camera will cut to one of her sons that's in the same room with her, and you're like, well, shit, like, this is all connected. They watched their mother for 20 years fight this battle with these people, with this system, and get turned away, get denied, and everything, and still somehow is able to like come back. And I think that's where I think that speaks to Owen's part about it being overwhelming in a sense, but mainly because it's just a lot of, I wouldn't even call it content. It's just a lot of subtext.
You're watching someone else's like emotions unfold in front of you, like in real time.
There are certain moments in this film where I felt like it was almost too intimate, like it shouldn't have been shown. Like, not in the sense of don't document it, but more just like, I can't remember which one of her sons, when it followed him to his like classroom in college, speaking from like a personal standpoint on why he's a poli-sci major, and like and Anna and I, like my housemate and I, ended up having a conversation about like the politeness and like pose that Black and brown bodied people have to embody at all times to be able to be taken seriously. And she was just like, I'm generally angry with how much all of these people are getting cut off in situations where they are not, like, they're in the right to be speaking at all, let alone like saying it with such calmness. Like, in general, being like, hey, here's this case that you keep ignoring and saying no. Has anything moved in it? Like, not even pressing, and just getting that no, and like, no, ma'am, we'll reach out. And it's like, okay, thank you. And it's like, if you were to respond badly, they would just stop picking up the calls. It's angering in a sense of, I felt like there are moments where I'm like, I almost feel like I shouldn't be allowed to see this, because this is like vulnerable as hell. And raw and it's going to exist in the world forever now. But I hope that people continue to respect the family's privacy, because I feel like there's a sense of entitlement in consumerism where people want to know what happened or like want to follow up. And it's like, these are people, these are real people. Please do respect the fact that like they have their own lives. There's this documentary made, but that doesn't mean that you're entitled to know what they're doing now. Let them have their privacy. So that was personal thoughts around like, I just hope that things are going well for them right now. And I don't really want to seek that information out because I don't think I'm entitled to it.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because before the podcast, I was watching and I guess we let the cat out of the bag that, you know, he gets out. But I mean, that's not that big of a spoiler. That's a good spoiler, to be honest. It makes a lot of what you see in the film worth it at the end. Granted, we would love if it was the film was 10 minutes long and she got him out like in 1998 when he should have been. But I was watching a Q&A or like a live Q&A that Fox and Rob did with some film festival, and I think it's interesting that apparently that Fox had like created a type of I wouldn't say persona, but she was a motivational speaker and orator. She would go to places and preach her story. I think she has a book. So she's kind of like a personality in some ways, and not in the way that most people become one. And I don't think she really even cares about that. Even though I do know she cares about spreading her message on prison abolition, on the message of the decarceration of like Black and brown people and the empowerment of those who are left behind by when their partners go to jail. So it's like interesting to hear that not personal space, but like, you know, the entitled to like someone's story and everything. I don't think that she doesn't deserve that. I just think it's interesting because she's someone who is so proud of that story and so very like vocal about it, that she's done her own talks without Garrett Bradley, which I thought was interesting, which is good because she's still preaching the same message. That's one thing I do want to talk about, is the way to circle back to Maddie and Anna's conversation about the politeness. There is a crucial moment in this film, actually one of my favorites, is when probably one of the second to last conversations Foxbridge has with someone down in the county office, where they tell her that they haven't seen anything all day, and also didn't hear from someone or something like that. And now up to this point, we have seen Foxbridge from back in the 90s when she had the home videos. We've seen her with her kids contemporarily. We see her with, different community members, different family members, her mom, everything. She's had this even keel calmness to her. She's upset, obviously, but she's strong and she's still able to smile and be happy. This moment is when she gets off this phone. She explains to the camera, and I'm assuming Garrett Bradley not behind the camera, but like next to the camera, how she says these people really don't care about these people in this system. Like, I even wrote down a quote that she said that was really, really hard, where she said, "Don't you want anybody out of the system that ain't supposed to be there?" And she says that like one of the judges said that if they let one person out, they're all gonna they want to all get out. And this is also one of the moments outside of, I think, the home videos, even then I don't think it happens, where she curses. And she has the movie opens up with her outside, like after her home videos are shown, it opens up with her, like, I think filming a commercial for her business. And she's creating this image, this like the polite image, this Southern woman talking about her experiences, like being a mother and how you should own a car, blah, 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 all that stuff. And this is when that image kind of just cracks and you get a lot of the realness that's in there. Like she like slams her fist on the table saying they're going to fucking pay for this, for what they did to him, and they're not letting him free or anybody else free. And it's my favorite moment, even though it's one of the moments that hurts the most, because I feel like she exhibits what a lot of Black women unfortunately have to. They have to because of societal expectations and pressures from both Black men and white people in mass. This level of calmness with pressure and oppression, having to bottle up that anger, that sadness, that depression to exhibit a calmness to the public eye. She does that throughout until that one moment. You see her. I wouldn't call it break, because I feel like that means that she like had like a mental break. I wouldn't say that, but she has a pure moment of, as Maddie said, like vulnerability and earnestness in her voice and in her tone, where she was just sick of it. and she's tired of doing these phone calls. She's tired of like, you know, raising her kids without her husband along with them, without their father. And it's like that moment, I think about that moment a lot, even though I just saw the movie already. But when that moment came up, I was waiting for that moment. I was thinking about that moment and how emotionally packed it is, and it's such a small moment. And because she spends most of the film explaining the situation, talking to multiple people about it, talking about personal power, personal growth, faith, and everything. But that was one moment where it's like I wouldn't even say she lost her faith, but where faith wasn't there, like it was just pure anger, sadness, and emotional expression.
Time is when you look at pictures from when your babies were small, and then you look at them and you see that they have mustaches and beards. And that the biggest hope that you had was that before they turned into men, they would have a chance to be with their father.
Something that we haven't said yet that I think helps a lot, or is what, in terms of the visual storytelling that makes it so impactful, is the fact that it's in black and white. And I know that's something that you wanted to talk about, Tracy.
Yes. So here on the Fifth Avenue podcast, we love some good old black and white. But I personally love black and white. And I felt like, I noted that I felt like the black and white and the lack of color made us pay closer attention to the emotional undercurrents of the movie and the underlying message and story that we're seeing. And I don't think that it wouldn't be as powerful with color, but I feel like it's more powerful without. And along with the lack of color being a vehicle for us to pay more closer attention to the emotional undercurrents, I would like to also say that black and white and the lack of color, I think, also it makes it reminiscent of archival footage. Granted, Fox Rich's out of home movies probably don't go back further than 1994, but at the same time, the grainy, even though the film isn't really grainy, but the grainy black and white, scanning of tapes, that feeling coupled with black and white cinematography, it kind of makes you think about memories. It makes you think about your own home movies. You think about the past. You think about looking over old home movies of your loved ones, or even old pictures. I think about going through my mom's family album and seeing pictures of my grandma as a kid, and it's in black and white or something like that. And I feel like that decision to make it black and white drew a lot of those feelings out of me, and I think that would elicit a lot of those feelings out of other people as well, especially with the topic at hand, where aside from the obvious prison problem and prison abolition discussion, the film is about love, and it's about familial love specifically, mm-hmm. and obviously romantic mm-hmm. love between Fox Rich and Rob Rich, but about love and family and hope and those memories that we latch onto, that we hold onto to keep us going through in the present. Maddie spoke about earlier about how Fox would make these videos for Robert. So he would see them when he gets out. And I think the persistence of that is strong enough in general. And I think adding the black and white to the fray makes it, I feel like it makes it stand out a little bit more. I love the inclusion of it, and especially with the almost impressionistic cinematography, where there are moments that don't even have much to do with the story that are just there, and you're enveloped in it. I would call it atmospheric. There's a moment towards the end, which I think is one of the best decisions of camera movement, is when I think it's right after Fox Rich has a terrible conversation with that lady, and we see a shot of I think the woods or a swamp.
Oh, the track, yes. So it's coming out, and it's a lake or water. Yeah.
Yes, in Angola, and I think the prison he was in is around Angola or something like that. Because I remember she says it earlier. She says we're gonna need some people to come with us, and it just the camera just goes slowly and it sweeps really fast, and then it cuts, and we're in the car with Fox Rich emotionally beside herself because she's going to the prison to get her husband out, and that black and white shot of the marsh, or I think it's called marsh, and the water and everything was just it was beautiful, and it's just it was hard for me not to be sucked into that. But alongside the black and white cinematography, I think what also is a driving force in this film is the music.
Yes.
So the music in this film, I think, is very integral in driving the emotional feelings that we have when we watch it, and really driving home that power of love and family. And I recently came across an interview that Garrett Bradley did with Pitchfork, where she revealed, and at this point, I didn't really, I loved the music, but I didn't think too much into it. So it was interesting to find out that she revealed that the music from this film came from her like going through a YouTube wormhole like we all do, which I felt very like humanizing. I'm like, thank you. Like I do that too, and I find real good stuff on there, specifically like a lot of jazz. And she, in the midst of like a YouTube wormhole, just listening to music, she found the music of Emahoy Tsegué-Maryam Guèbrou, who is an Ethiopian nun from Ethiopia, obviously, who is also a classically trained pianist, and who is like 98 and is still alive, which I think is amazing. Shout out to her, for real. That should have been my shout out, to be honest. And I when I was reading this article, I read that she initially had in mind, what is his name? It's like an artist, Neil Young. She had Neil Young's music in mind for the film, and like almost up until right before the film started to be cut for editing, is when she made the switch. Apparently, once she heard the music herself, she immediately knew that is what she wanted to use. She wanted to use Guébrou's music, and the music from the film is specifically, it's not an original score, but it's taken primarily from one of Emahoy's albums, Ethiopiques, Volume 21. That means that there's like 20 other volumes, which is crazy. It's a collection. It's a 2006 collection of piano pieces by her. And Naomi, I know you wanted to talk about it because I know you enjoyed it as well. I think we all did, but I know you brought it back to my attention.
Yeah, well, the reason why the initial reason why I brought it to the attention was partially comic relief, because one of the main songs that is played throughout the documentary kind of reminds me of the Space Song by Beach House. And like the entire time I was just like, this sounds way too much like that. And then right after I stopped crying, again for comic relief, I was like, Christian, listen to this song and tell me if they don't sound the same. And he was like, damn, they do.
I just want to say I did the same fucking thing. I listened to that album afterwards because I'm like, what does this remind me of? And I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. But aside from like that, what I really appreciate about it is that something that I really hate about documentaries, or like what always gets to me about documentaries, is like the super obvious like underscoring to make you feel a certain thing, like, oh, this is a sad moment, here is sad music, or oh, this is a scary moment, here is some scary eerie music. And this doesn't do that. Like this, it isn't just like, this is some sad or melancholy music to fit with this, tough subject. Like, no, this is just like beautiful and emotional music, but not in a sense where it's manipulative like a lot of other documentaries. Like this is like real. Like this is like a really good pairing. And also by using like the same 2 or 3 songs, I think, throughout the film, like it also helps with the like cohesion, and also this like, and this along with like the pairing of the older clips that Fox Rich made herself, and with alongside the contemporary ones, it kind of also speaks to this idea of time, in that it is both linear and non-linear. And yeah, I don't know how to make that thesis more coherent, but
I really wanted to say that I like that you said the manipulation with soundtracks and other documentaries, because like I wouldn't have thought, I mean, also shout out to trauma gang when you don't realize manipulation is happening. But like, as far as I would say this not to shit on people, but I think unless a soundtrack like more aimed at like music type things like Scott Pilgrim, for example, like a lot of people don't appreciate the music that is lyricless in films because it's so interwoven to the point of, like Yelly said, like making you feel a certain emotion. And I feel like there are a lot of moments that are just silent and it's a respectful silence, but like also this very much, I mean, the moments of like home film thing, like, oh, it's Christmas, or like the one video of the twins, like, I can't remember which one got an award, and it's like, why didn't you get an award? And it's like, like just kind of the like silliness of it, and then they like fade it out to music, and I'm like, yeah, like that's, it doesn't feel like you're trying to feel any kind of like, oh, we want to emulate some sort of like pity or some sort of overwhelming that, like, we're not trying to make you feel a thing. It's just like, here's authenticity almost.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think like one thing that I would like to say is that I feel like the music is emblematic of the movie as a whole, because I think we've spoken a lot about sadness and us crying over it, but I do want to say that this film is, without anything, is a very beautiful one. Mm-hmm. And it's a very heartwarming one. We speak of like, the big scary, prison, obviously industrial system, all of this, but at the core of it all is a film about family and about persistence and about love. And I think the music itself, the score itself, reflects that, in that it's not, it's kind of like what Nayeli was saying, where it's like, it's beautiful yet a bit sad, but not depressing. It oscillates between these poles of feeling, because that's, like Nayeli was saying, is like a reality. And I think that the music itself is, it reflects what the film is as in its totality, where it is a film that is not a full-on sob fest, pity, situation, trauma porn situation. It is a beautiful film about family, about perseverance, and I think I'm saying the same thing over again, but I think the music is very reminiscent of what the film is itself. And I find it very, very incredible that this music was found by happenstance, and that I couldn't think of any other music that would go over this, that doesn't like fully tell the story the way this music does. Like it somehow tells the whole story within its composition. And one of the things I also found interesting is how the story of Fox Rich and Emahoy is almost similar in some ways, when, as I don't remember what year, I think in the 60s or something like that, I don't remember, around the time of like Mussolini's dictatorship in Italy, I believe.
Yeah.
Italy gained control over Ethiopia, and because of that, Emahoy became a prisoner, like a literal prisoner of war. And the fact that Fox Rich was herself imprisoned, I think that's one thing I want to make sure people remember, that it's, yes, the movie is about her release of her husband, but she was also imprisoned herself for quite a bit before she was let out. But well before he did. But yeah, like Emahoy was a prisoner of war, and Fox Rich was in prison. Her husband was in prison, and they were both Black women that had to shoulder this huge responsibility in this huge oppressive state, and chose and enacted resistance. That I'm just very interested in, like, even glad that I was able to experience this cohesion of three separate, like decade separate, or generation separate, actually, Black women coming together by happenstance to have a story that comes together so cohesively.
For me, it was important to address this broader critical sickness that is taken over America from the beginning of time, right? But I also felt very much that what brought me to making this film wasn't so much those big issues as it was her and this family and Robert, and leaning into the intimacy and beauty and strength of what I saw in them as individuals.
Thank you for listening to the Fifth Avenue Podcast, where we come together to talk about all things cinema. If you like the show today, please follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Fifth Ave Cinema. That fifth is with a 5, where you can also reach us for questions and comments. You can also reach us by email at film@pdx.edu. We hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as we enjoyed making it for you, and we'll see you next week. Remember that all Black lives matter, and we will and should defund the police.